tree branches snapping, and the blue and gold colors of a tiled dome. Those are among the last images Captain Dale Black saw before he heard and felt the explosion of a plane crash considered to be unsurvivable.
Airplane pilot Captain Dale Black was the lone survivor of a horrific plane crash when he was only 19 years old.
Speed was recorded by the NTSB at 135 miles per hour. It was considered non-survivable. The airplane just broke into literally a couple thousand pieces, and then 3 pilots fell to 70 feet to the ground.
In his book, Visiting Heaven, Dale shares his remarkable brush with death, his journey to heaven, and his miraculous recovery that taught him how to live without limits.
Dale Black's story is remarkable. It's wonderful to have you with us on the program today,
Pleasure
Dale.
to be with you, an honor.
Go back to that moment, if you can, because for a long time your memory was lost to the details of things. But when the impact happened, what was that like for you?
I was looking down at my body and recognizing that I couldn't be dead because I'd never felt more alive.
Yeah.
I looked down and saw, oh my gosh, that poor young man, Dale. He died so young and he had so much to do. And then all of a sudden, I began to realize, this is about 20 seconds later, I began to realize, oh my gosh, I'm a spirit.
Wow.
And I have a soul.
Yeah.
And I used to live in that body. And all of a sudden I realized, Terry, that I had my whole life upside down. I was living for what I looked like, what I could do, what the money I could make. And I had my spiritual life down at the bottom of the totem pole, barely dealing with it. Although I must say, thank God I was saved. At a 12-year-old young man, I sincerely, honestly gave my heart and life to Jesus, invited him in. I was full of zeal. And then I drifted little by little off course until this crash occurred.
Well, not unusual for a 19-year-old to kind of have all of life and the dreams and the goals ahead of him. You, after the crash, I mean, it was remarkable, honestly, that you lived because you had so much body damage. I mean, you fell 7 stories once the plane crashed. Yeah. You had parts of the plane, glass, everything embedded in you, and eyes severely damaged. We'll talk about that in a minute. But for 3 days, you were in a coma. What happened to you during those 3 days?
Well, this is the strangest thing, and it's a real story that doesn't fade away. The memories are always there, because I think the memory is right here in my heart. Mm-hmm. I think the memory is here.
How could it not be?
Yeah. And how could it not be? It's correct, because my body was on the earth, but I had seen the other side. I'd gone to heaven, and I had a just incredible experience. My first impression, if I could say what's the most that I noticed right away, was the music, the feeling and hearing the sounds of music and feeling the music go through my cells and seeing the intense light that I'd been seeing for quite some time and recognizing with no one saying a word, I knew the light was coming from God. There was no doubt. Everybody knew it was God.
Were you frightened? What did it feel like?
No, I felt like I was maybe a kid on a special ride at Disney World, Disneyland. I didn't have any fear, didn't have any concern about what was behind me back on Earth. I was just looking forward, but...
I was interested in your description of heaven because I've heard people who've had death experiences say the same thing, that everything is alive there. Things that would be inanimate objects here are alive there, that there's a life and a pulsing to it all. Yeah. It must have been mesmerizing.
It is and was, and it's like, you know, even our eyes, there's all this light spectrum in reality, but our eyes can only see this much. But I think in heaven, we're enhanced. Same with sounds and so on.
We are not even touching the tip of the iceberg on all of the things that you describe and define in here. And yet for 40 years, you you had decided not to share it. Talk about the conversation with your grandfather and why that happened.
I told my grandfather about what had happened. I knew that he was not really too Pentecostal or charismatic, as we would say today. He was a dyed-in-the-wool, kind of a Baptist type guy from the Nazarene Church. So I couldn't tell him everything, but I told him enough to where he said, "Now, Dale, is this story sacred?" "Oh, Grandpa, yeah, it's sacred." He said, "Are you sure you want to tell it?" "Grandpa, I don't want to tell it. I'm just telling you because I got to talk to somebody." And anyway, he said, "Well," and he cried and he said, "That explains why you're healing so fast."
Yeah.
That explains a lot. And I said, "Grandpa, what am I to do with this story? It's changed everything, and I'm beginning to understand more and more." And he said, you consider this. Do what God has told you to do. Always do what God tells you to do. But why not consider at least living your life on what you think you heard and saw and become a reflection of that experience? So I went and prayed about it, and boy, I was glad that I didn't need to talk about it.
Why did you finally decide to talk about it? I mean, there's actually a movie. Yeah.
Yeah, it was 40 years later, and I just felt like my heart was being pounded on and my ribs were being nudged, and I couldn't sleep until I agreed, "Okay, Lord, all right, I'll do it." And funny, I said, "I'll do it, but only for family and kids." You know, I'll tell the story and we'll put it in writing for family. And then when I'm gone, whatever you want to do with it. Of course, God had other plans. And my wife was a large part of the making of this book.
I want to say it's a remarkable story. There's an upcoming movie called Near Death Experience, I believe.
After Death. Yeah.
After Death Experience. And so watch for that. I've been seeing ads for it that it's coming out, but Dale's book is called Visiting Heaven, and it is available nationwide. If you'd like to find out more about that new movie, After Death, go to cbn.com. We've got some information there. Dale, it's a remarkable story. Thank you for sharing it.
My pleasure.
Great to have you with us today.
My pleasure. God bless you.